Okay, I know I have other books to record, but I was kind of wanting to check this one out. And I've kind of learned that usually when it comes to books, unless it's something purely smut, I'm not going to be doing a reading for it. But, yeah, so any books I pick up are usually going to be done for reading, so I usually try not to read too much more unless I'm doing these recordings. So I'm actually reading a lot less than what I usually would do. So y'all better appreciate this little sacrifice of mine. Anyway, this is going to be, I think it was, dang it, what was it called? If you just got to this book and you like my book readings and you haven't subscribed, feel free to subscribe. I've got memberships, I've got Patreon. But essentially it's Survival in Another World with my Mistress. At first when I heard this one, or heard the title, I was thinking that a guy was cheating on his girlfriend or wife or whatever with his mistress and they both died and ended up in this world. That's what I thought it was going to be. Because, I mean, that's what you would probably think. But apparently it's not. Prologue, the sudden beginning of my survival life. You've heard of survival games, yeah? I'm not talking about getting your cardio in by chasing your buds in the woods somewhere with our airsoft weaponry. That would be fun. I mean, the kind of games where you gotta collect materials to make a home base while managing your hunger and thirst. You know, like that one famous foreign-made game where the world's made of blocks and you gotta dig up the ground and cut down trees to build a house and go adventuring. Minecraft? Is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about something else? There aren't too many console survival titles, but my PC gamers in the crowd know what I'm talking about. I happen to be in a bit of a survival sim nut. Survival game is a general descriptor, but they actually run a pretty wide gamut. You've got games set after the fall of civilization, where you have to cut out a niche for yourself in the post-apocalypse. Others are cut from sci-fi cloth and set you up making a crash landing on some unexplored planet in an escape pod after your spaceship wrecks, and you've got to wrangle the local flora and fauna. You've got the occasional game that strands you up some snowbound mountain and wave after wave of games that drop you into a world overrun by zombies. And then there are the ones that aren't so dire, where you build your own town and go adventuring in a civilized world. Yeah, stuff like that, yeah. Sorry for rambling. I figured you might need a preamble to explain the kind of situation I found myself in now. To make a long story short, what I'm trying to explain is quite simple. I love those kinds of games. Yeah, I love games. Emphasis on games. How the heck did I wind up here? My name's Kosuke Shibata. I was a 20-year-old bachelor. I had white... Okay, so yeah, like I said, this is not what I thought it was going to be. I had a white-collar job. I liked playing PC games, and every night I went for a run around town. And now I found myself standing on the edge of a vast wasteland with a dense forest behind me. I saw no sign of man-made buildings, let alone any kind of road. I was wearing my underwear, shirt, sweatshirt, and sweatpants, socks, and my favorite walking shoes. The only possessions I had on my person were my smartphone, the key to my house, and my wallet. I should have been fine since I had my wallet, right? Don't know. I had a couple 10,000 yen notes in there, so I could flag down a taxi and find my way home no problem once they drove me downtown. And that would be true if this was Japan. Or even Earth. Where the heck am I? Up in the sky, I could see ocean, land, and clouds, like a whole other world made to Earth specifications, so to speak. You read right. In other words, I could see a terrestrial planet hanging in the sky, plain as the sun and moon back home. It shared the sky with a crater-scarred moon. Both of them were huge. The planet took up about 30% of the sky, and the moon was the size of my fist when I held it up for comparison. There's absolutely no way I'm still on Earth. It was a miracle that I hadn't choked on the atmosphere or roasted alive or frozen solid. Wait, I thought. Could it just be a dream? I pinched and slapped my cheeks like you'd normally do in this sort of situation, but I still didn't wake up. Damn it! I'd be cool with this if it were a game. If this were a game! That doesn't mean I'd like to give it a spin in person. I fell to my hands and knees, oarsing like someone acknowledging their superior in the comments section. Don't ask me about that, because I have no clue what that meant. Be that as it may, I couldn't stay on my knees forever. I'd get hungry and thirsty and have to take a crap, and eventually the sun would set. I didn't see any wildlife around, but that didn't mean nightfall wouldn't bring any out. Only a fool goes out after dark unprotected, so my encyclopedic survival sim skills and the handful of things I knew about actual life in the wild feebly chimed in. Surely there'd be zombies, skeletons, or some other warlike creatures. Anything could be out there, no matter how grotesque or mind-bending to imagine. This is no joke. I'd be easy prey for some nocturnal carnivore stumbling blind in the dark. I needed to find a place where I can safely spend the night. But what do I do? In survival games, the player can always make basic tools so long as they have the raw materials. Sometimes they even use their bare hands to cut down trees or break rocks, but I couldn't do that. Yeah, Pal World does that. Should I give it a try? Nah, there's absolutely no way. I picked out a decently sized stone from the ones that were scattered around the wasteland as an alternative. It was about the size of two of these stones you place on top of jars for pickling foods, which were a bit bigger than my hand. If I struck it against a rock, I was sure I could effectively chip away at it until it took on a sharp point. Having a pointed tool like this would make exploration easier. It would be much more efficient for cutting vines and woodworking than my bare hands could ever be. It was a Stone Age solution, but I was better off with crude tools than no tools. And I hit the stone against a biggish rock over and over. About a dozen or so tries, I finally got a point that looked good enough. I was worried that all the noise I was making might draw the attention of some creature higher up the food chain, but I was safe for the time being. I called the stone with the pointed tip and easy handle stone knife number 1. I tucked it into my sweatpants pocket since I'd spotted some other rocks that looked good for throwing. Humankind's great advantage are the stamina for long-distance running and our talent at throwing things. Sure, dexterous fingers for making tools and higher reasoning faculties should be on that list, but I wasn't so confident in these. And I wasn't completely confident in my stamina for long-distance running either. After all, the most exercise I did every day was that nightly lap around the neighborhood. First, I've got to find shelter. That was one of the basic necessities for surviving. Most people assume the most important thing is water. I did too at one point, but after playing so many survival games, I came to see the light. The absolute highest priority was finding a place to hunker down through the night. In that game with the world made of blocks, I had gotten too absorbed in walking around collecting materials and been attacked by the zombies and skeletons that came out at night. Yeah, Minecraft, definitely. In games where mankind's been destroyed and zombies run amok, I wound up being devoured by the zombies that started running around. In the Snowy Mountain survival game, I froze to death come sunset. Based on all those experiences, I knew it had it to be true. I'd die eventually without food or water, that much was a fact, but without safe ground of some kind, I wouldn't even make it through the first night. If this were a game world, then I'd be busy making a shelter that was raised off the ground right about now. In other words, a very simple shelter with the floor rested on top of pillars. In most games, hostile characters couldn't climb pillars without steps, so you'd generally be safe so long as you took refuge in a place that wasn't too high for them to hop up and reach you. If it had walls and a roof, even better. I was going to say that do something that at a tree, but there are creatures that climb up trees, so yeah. However, that didn't work all the time. Some games had enemies that would aggressively strike down the pillars. In any case, making walls and a roof seemed way out of my league for now from both a material and a technical position. I turned my back on that windswept wasteland and headed toward the dense woods. The wasteland had rocks and stones scattered all over, but none of them were big enough for me to hide behind. I figured I'd go climb a tree in the forest instead. Trees were a consistent asset. You could climb up one and hide yourself among the foliage so you couldn't be seen from the ground. However, I still had to be careful with things like bugs, snakes, and lizards. As a kid, I'd promised my older brother that I'd look out for scratches and other signs on tree trunks before I climbed them. The last thing anyone wants is to fight with some iguana-looking critter for real estate, you know? And so I set out into the forest. Chapter 1, the sudden beginning of my survival life, days 1 and 2. There I was, making my way through the forest. We lump all forests together as one category, but there are actually all kinds, and everyone envisions different things. The forest I found myself in had an old growth feel to it. To put it simply, thickets, trees, bugs. Yeah, that's about summed it up. My discomfort index was skyrocketing. It was going to be kind of sort of really hard to push my way through the thicket without proper equipment. Not to mention my only clothes, my sweatshirt and sweatpants, were bound to get all tattered before I knew it. Still, with no means of surviving in the wasteland, I really didn't have much choice. Off I went, all by my lonesome. It would be dangerous to venture aimlessly into the deep woods, so I wandered around near the edge. After about an hour of searching, I turned up a tree that I thought I'd be able to climb. There was a bit of a clearing around it too, so it seemed like a good place to make my base. Now, let's take a look. I carefully checked the perimeter and the state of the tree. From what I could tell, there weren't any animal tracks or unnatural marks on the trees. There were no signs of dangerous-looking insects like bees or ants. You might think it's strange that I was worried about ants, and I get it. Your average domestic ant in Japan's no threat. But you have to remember they're cousins to the hornet. Any unfortunate soul who stepped on a fire ant hill can tell you that. Yeah, fire ants are no joke. Speaking of bugs, I had yet to find any strange varieties of insects, however much you might expect to find them on faraway planets or alternate Earths. Not to say that I actually wanted to run into any. Anyway, the tree looked safe, so I slowly eased my way up it. I'd admit I was scared, but I made it about 2 meters before I screwed up and looked down. I would have to find some way to anchor myself or I wouldn't be able to sleep. I slowly climbed down and took a breather. What did I need next? Probably food, fire, and water. So long as I had water, I could survive for a long time without food. Seeing as a fire would drastically improve my immediate chances of survival, I figured that was the highest priority. Which was a shame, because while I knew how to start one in theory, I'd never actually done it before. I figured I ought to get to it while I still had some daylight to work by. First, I need the straightest branches I could rustle up. I gathered large wood chips, supple branches, flat stones, and assorted small bits of kindling. I was afraid I'd wind up barbecue if I couldn't contain the flame, so I cleared up the fallen leaves near my base tree, dug a small hole with stone knife number 1, and placed a big wood chip inside. I used stone knife number 1 to hollow it out in several places. Next, I would snap a straight branch in two and whittle the points on the ends. Then I would pack the wood chips into the hollow, hold the branch between my hands, and rotate it, except I wouldn't, because it was clear that this would only end in blisters and wasted effort with my limited stamina and willpower. And this is where my sweatpants would come in handy. La la la, come here, string. I pulled the drawstring from my waistband and tied it around the supple branch, turning it into a bow. I wrapped the bowstring up in the straight rod I had made, planning to make frictional heat by moving the bow back and forth to rotate the rod. Basically, I would recreate the tried and true bow drill method, which is what Senku used in Dr. Stone. Smart idea. I pressed the rod down using the flat stone and stuffed the wood chips into the hollow where the rod would do its work. Now all I had to do was move the bow back and forth. It was hard and painful. The bow broke, and I couldn't get it to catch fire. After much trouble, I somehow wrung a couple of sparks out of it, but I still couldn't actually get anything to catch. Damn it! But don't think I've been defeated yet. This time I prepared even more wood chips and shavings for my starter. That was when I realized that crushing dry leaves would probably be best. I was stupid, so stupid I wouldn't be surprised if my soul gem had turned completely black if I might shamelessly steal an idiom. Are you talking Skyrim? And if so, what's the issue with that? I don't get it. Whatever. And at last I had my fire. I already had kindling prepared, so I turned it into an open-air fire right away. Ah, so warm. The sun was about to set, so I stopped staring at the fire and went to gather more kindling from nearby. I'm starving. As I stared into the fire, I started wondering how I wound up here. I couldn't come up with any rational explanation. Was this my punishment for some sin I didn't know I committed? I looked up at the sky and took in the planet and moon hanging overhead. There's no world where this is normal. Absolutely not. Did I die? Is this the world we go to after? What even were my final memories on Earth? I cast my mind back. I was messing with my phone, watching TV in the living room. I didn't have any family. My parents were divorced, and my mother, who had taken custody of me, suddenly passed away 2 years ago due to cerebral apoplexy. My dad, being who he was, already had a new family, so I was living on my own now. It felt too awkward to move in with them. I had the day off, and... oh yeah, I left my apartment to stop by the bank after lunch. And that was the last thing I remembered. Those stepped out the front door and got whisked to another world plots were infectious enough without infecting my own life. Another world. That was what this place had to be. At the very least, I knew this wasn't Earth. Was I now yet another fantasy protagonist? The prospect didn't particularly fill me with excitement. There was something depressing about and lonely about having to survive all alone in the woods to the point that it was driving me to affected folksiness. I didn't mind the genre. Getting immersed in the world of a story was an opiate for a heart aggrieved by the world's hardships. It was pretty clear before I changed realities that I wasn't the only one feeling desperate to retreat someplace where the rules make sense and work in your favor. But this harsh survival game where all I had was the clothes on my back wasn't what I wished for at all. Not at all. Nuh-uh. If I had to wind up in another world, why couldn't they have given me some kind of well-known power to cheat with? I was a modern-day kid who grew up cozily in Japan with all the necessities of life. Electricity, gas, running water. I was born in the 90s, damn it. How the hell was I supposed to survive plunked into a situation like this? I'm so hungry, I said again, feeling the point bore repeating. I was pretty thirsty too. Damn it all, it wouldn't do to starve. I could feel my willpower chipping away. Tomorrow I need to find food, or water at the very least. The kindling I had collected was smoky, perhaps because it was moist or still alive. I didn't mind. It seemed like the sort of thing that would keep bugs and larger pests away. As I gazed at the flames, hugging my knees, tears welled up in my eyes. The smoke's fault, obviously. Damn it all. If only this were a survival game, I would just press the F key or E key right now to bring up the fire's crafting menu right about now. Wait a minute. Cooked meat. Materials. Raw meat, number 1. Not enough materials. Pure water. Materials. Water, 1. Not enough materials. Torch. Materials. Wood, 1. Not enough materials. Suddenly this pop-up menu looking thing appeared over the fire. I gaped at it. It would look like a crafting menu. Why? Is it really actually a dream? If it isn't, I'd like to wake up already. I tried pinching my cheeks again, even lightly whacking myself with the stones I picked up earlier, but I still didn't wake up. Naturally, it really hurt. I just need to accept that this is reality. For whatever reason, there was a crafting menu here. As you'd expect from a simple fire, I couldn't make anything too fancy, but nevertheless, this was a huge discovery. I wasn't sure if it had appeared because I was thinking about crafting menus or because I had imagined pressing the right key to bring it up. But this would be very useful to me. I could survive out here so long as I had this. For the time being, I started experimenting with closing the menu. After some inspection, I discovered that I could do all kinds of things by picturing keyboard shortcuts. I could access the object in front of me with the F key, but by imagining I was pressing the WASD keys, I could move in all directions regardless of my posture, movement speed, and inertia, and accelerate by holding the Shift key at the same time. Doing so made me incredibly tired, though. Lastly, by imagining hitting the spacebar, I could jump about head high. This also worked after I jumped off my own volition, meaning I had kind of a jury-rigged double jump. Nice. Okay, this is very weird. I also discovered that I could make myself crouch with the C key and even lie flat if I held it down. I could move in some really weird ways by moving my body on its own and imagining pressing the keys at the same time. I bet the way I'm moving would freak someone out if they saw me right now, I murmured as I did a running jump of my own accord, slammed the spacebar, and slid diagonally midair. I could jump stupid high, so I could easily climb to the top of a tree too. Moving like this wasn't that big of a deal, though. It was a huge asset toward my survival, sure, but I turned up something much more important. Tab brings up the inventory. You heard me right. Just like in any mini survival games, I could bring up the inventory by pressing tab in this world. Just like Skyrim. From the inventory menu, there was a lot of stuff I could access, such as my stats screen and a basic crafting screen for all the stuff I could assemble without more specialized tools. I found the crafting menu. I was super excited. My chances of survival increased exponentially. I now had the power to create modern conveniences by picking up whatever random stones and branches I found lying on the ground. There was nothing to fear now. So long as I can use the crafting menu, there's nothing for a survival sim completionist like me to fear. How naive I was. Even if I had the tools to make them, it's not like I'm any good at throwing axes or javelins. I've never used a bow and arrow either. I had lined up all kinds of tools I crafted using materials on hand in front of the fire. First I made a stone axe. It felt wrong not to. It was a foundational tool of so many games. It was amazing. I took an ordinary stone and a gnarled piece of wood and turned it into the perfect stone axe with a straight handle and sharpened stone edge. Now I could spend time chopping down trees and splitting skulls should anything hostile show its face. Shame I never cut down a tree or faced off against a wild animal in my entire life, and I had no idea what I was doing. Ha ha ha! Next I made a stone spear. I used a stone and a piece of wood for the materials. I know, that went without saying. Sorry for stating the obvious. This one had a spearhead that looked like it was made of chipped stone instead of a blade like the axe. The tip was sharp enough to easily pierce an animal's hide and potentially mess up its vitals with a clean hit. The balance wasn't bad either, so it seemed like it would work for stabbing or throwing. I gave throwing it a shot, and it flew reasonably far before sticking into the ground. I didn't know why the tip didn't break, but it was all good to me. If I was going to actually use it as a weapon, I figured I'd probably best to prepare a bunch of spears and throw them in succession. I bet I'd cause a lot of damage on a hit. Then I'm in my favorite. A bow and stone-tipped arrows. I crafted the bow using a very supple branch and a nearby creeping vine-looking plant that looked like it made a good bowstring. When I knocked and let loose an arrow, it flew pretty far. There were two problems, though. It didn't fly straight, and I couldn't hit my target. I'd need practice. Well, duh. Finally came the star performer, a stone knife. It was a very sharp blade with a wooden handle, and it did a phenomenal job. Scraping off pieces of trees and cutting plants with it was practically effortless. To my dismay, it broke after I got too carried away hacking off tree branches. I had to be careful with how I handled it, especially since I didn't want to cause myself any undue lacerations. Well, now I can breathe a little easier. I felt a bit safer now that I had weapons, crude as they were. Then I noticed something interesting. Huh? Now that I have a stone knife, I can craft more kinds of items. Knives were also tools for making things after all. I was able to craft crude stone implements just by putting stones and pieces of wood together. By using those tools, I can make even more things out of wood and plants. For example, my crafting menu now included things like wooden plates and a basket made of woven fibers from plants or woods. There were two things in particular that looked quite useful. A wooden canteen and a pump drill fire starter kit sound like good things to have. It went without saying why a canteen would be good, but it was incredible I could make that fire starter kit. It was an evolved version of the bow drill I had made. The main part of it was an axle like a long spinning top. You fitted it into a hole in the bar which acted as a handle. There was a string wrapped around the axle that was tied to both edges of the bar, and pulling the handle up and down caused the axle to rapidly rotate left and right, creating enough friction to throw sparks. Hang on. Huh? You don't really understand what I mean? That's the best I could do to explain it. Go look it up on the internet. The important thing here was that I had obtained a tool for easily starting fires. I had managed to make a fire from wood and grass, so I decided to collect more to keep on me. Having an inventory sure is handy. I could even store the tools I'd made in my inventory. Normally it would have been near impossible to go around carrying all these heavy stone spears, the axes, and whatnot. On my actual person, I had 2 pockets in my sweatshirt and 2 pants pockets that I could use for storing stuff. I would have been really weighed down if I had only had those and my arms to carry things in. In the end, I had 3 stone spears, 1 stone axe, 1 bow, 20 arrows, a wooden canteen, a fire starter kit, some chopped wood and bark to use as kindling, a stone knife, and a woven fiber basket I could sling over my shoulder for carrying throwing stones. It had taken some trial and error to figure out the menu, but in just 3 hours, I kitted myself out with a small Stone Age armory. In your average light novel, this would definitely be considered a special ability that let me cheat at life here. What a lame-ass ability. Sure, it was beyond regular human intellect, but however, the only thing I could do with it was effortlessly make crude tools. And since I was still clumsy at using those tools, I didn't feel overpowered at all. This is the kind of thing you expect a minor character to have. You might be a minor character, dude. Given the choice, I'd prefer the ability to make whatever tool I wanted appear or something like that. Being able to half-assed emulate a survival game like this was stupid beyond belief. Why? Games like this usually had a god mode where you would be invincible, fly, and go through objects. Or a creative mode where you could get an infinite number of materials. Console commands were apparently also off the table. I couldn't use actual cheats here at all. It was such a stupid power, yet it was currently my only lifeline. Time to get some sleep. Going hunting at night on the very first day always results in death. Using the crafting menu and another feature I discovered, I managed to figure out a safe way to sleep in the tree. I made a hammock using plants and wood fiber. However, I had never used a hammock before. Could I actually hang it and use it? Once again, my newfound superpower came to the rescue. Huh, this is pretty handy. I switched to place mode by calling up the UI and pressing use on the hammock. A 3-dimensional, semi-transparent hammock appeared to me. I moved my eyes focus center of focus to an appropriate position and thought about placing it there. The hammock popped up precisely where I wanted it. I used my double jump to climb the tree, and then lay down in the hammock, which was hidden among the branches. Thankfully, it didn't get all that cold overnight. If it had reached freezing, I would have been up a creek without a paddle. Ugh, I'm so hungry. Tomorrow I'd go foraging. I've been worried about not being able to sleep from hunger and thirst, but I zonked out then and there, probably from fatigue and anxiety. I hoped tomorrow would bring better days. Hello, Kosuke here. Today I'm going to be playing Day 2 of Survival in Another World. If only this were a game. But no, this was still my actual life. I was reminded of all the people who used speech synthesizer apps to play the main characters of games where they had been thrown into horrible situations and then forced to find means of survival. I would be a bit kinder to everyone if I got to go home to my world. Maybe dial back the impulse to laugh at other people's misfortune so much. Anyway, it was morning. I was incredibly thirsty. Water was clearly my first priority. A forest needed a steady and abundant water source. The question was, where could I find it? I can't come up with any good ideas. The only thing I can do is wander around and hope I find something. I have everything I need in my inventory, so I don't need to stick to the border between the wasteland and the forest now. I'll spend the day exploring the forest for water and things that look edible. Time to register these shortcuts. I assigned numbers to the items in my inventory so I could take an item out at a moment's notice. Just by thinking it, I could switch between holding the spear, axe, knife, and bow in an instant. It's like a magic trick. Then it suddenly hit me. If I could do double jump regardless of what I was doing, then maybe I could do something similar with my weapons and tools. After some trial and error, I had discovered by imagining left-clicking the mouse, I could do a basic action with the weapon, or rather, I could do an ideal action with it. It felt really weird, surrendering direct control of my body, but now I could use the spear and the bow. Using the bow actually displayed the sight for the bow in my vision. Now even an amateur like me could shoot like a marksman. By combining my own actions with the command input, I could even fire one arrow after another at the speed of light. Although the second shot would inevitably be a vastly inferior one. In other words, I would have to train if I wanted to get better at it. I'd have to really work hard to make that happen. And then, oh crap, there's something over there. I was glad to have found a source of water, but there was something dangerous looking there already. A lizard. Wait, was it a lizard? Maybe it was a wolf. Maybe it was more like a lizard. At any rate, it was equally scaly and furry and as big as a large dog, and sure as hell didn't look herbivorous. I was glad for the small mercy that first contact hadn't been with anything in the veins of a certain monster hunting game's earth-shaking, huge walking death machines. Essentially a dragon. Or a chimera. Or a griffin. Or who knows what else. Maybe this was its territory or something because it was snoozing away in a sunny spot. Would it be possible for me to sneak over and fill my canteen? But if it stirred and gobbled me up, that'd be game over for yours truly. At the very least, I was sure I'd be seriously injured, contract some infectious disease, and die sweaty, delusional, and soiling myself. Time to retreat. If I wanted to challenge it, I need to set traps or something to even stand a chance. I calmly imagined the C key and entered stealth mode. Then I imagined the S key and smoothly started moving backwards. This way I wouldn't make some careless mistake like stepping on a twig and making a big rock. Yep. Because I wasn't watching where I was going. I wound up plunging into a bush. I quietly looked toward the lizard wolf. Please don't notice me, I beg you. Our eyes met. Unfortunately, we didn't fall in love, which means... And I expected as much. It tried as hard as it could to intimidate me. Oh yeah, you want to try? Come at me, bro. I leveled the tip of my stone spear at it. If this was inevitable, then it would have been better off getting a blow in while I was asleep. Damn it all. The lizard wolf didn't suddenly lunge at me. It held back, cautiously measuring the distance between us. I didn't know what its movement capabilities were, but in this kind of case, victory went to the one who made the first move. Take that. Kosuke threw the stone spear. The lizard wolf nimbly dodged it. What the fuck? Oh yeah! The lizard wolf used body slam, and it was super effective. Kosuke took out a stone spear and immediately struck it. The lizard wolf took damage, but Kosuke was knocked back. This isn't the time to be pretending I'm reading game text. Huh? I panicked. The stone spear I used to counter its attack broke, but I was lucky enough to stick it into its mouth, so now the lizard wolf was on its side on the ground, flailing. Stone axe in hand, I ran over to the writhing creature and swung down with all my might. And continued hacking at it. The next thing I knew, the blade of the axe was gone, and I was whacking at the lizard wolf's messed up head with the handle. It was so grotesque that I puked. I was but a commoner who had only ever killed bugs. The only time I had ever touched something dead was when my mom died. Oh. I couldn't really handle watching slasher films either. Even fairly corny, low-grade gore in games had me queasy in the past. Phew. The only thing that came out was bile, but I felt a bit better after. I had to contend with reality. First things first, I need to deal with the carcass. Can I put it in my inventory? As I thought that, I realized I could access the carcass of the lizard wolf. I gave it a try and opened its inventory. Nice, I don't have to carve it. This is a godly feature. Its carcass contained a reasonable amount of raw meat, bones, fangs, tendons, and pelts. I moved all of these into my inventory and then the lizard wolf disappeared. All that remained was a puddle of blood. This was incredible. Although the blood was a bit of a nuisance, it was quite possible that it might draw other dangerous creatures. So in my crafting menu, crafting wooden canteens, filling them up with water from the spring, and then putting them in my inventory. Each canteen could hold approximately a liter of water, so I filled 50 of them. That should be enough water to last me for now. Now I need to find a safe place to make a fire and make this water drinkable. I was thirsty, but I wasn't about to start chugging canteens. Who knew what kind of germs, poisons, or parasites were lurking within? If I got diarrhea here in the wilderness, then I was obviously going to wind up dying of dehydration. That's not even touching on the question of what horrible business might be native to this world. ready to do me in with illnesses never before conceived by a human mind. I checked to make sure I wasn't injured and left the spring after thoroughly washing the blood out of my clothes. Along the way, I picked up more stone and wood. I remade my lost stone spear and stone axe while looking for a place to rest like I did yesterday. I found a tree and clearing in a spot that seemed a good enough distance away and started a fire. Using the fire starter kit was faster and took much less effort than the bone drill had. Water, water. From the fire's crafting screen menu, I picked drinking water and cooked meat and started crafting. It only took about 10 seconds to craft the first item, but those 10 seconds felt like forever. Then I took the crafted drinking water out from the completed column, took off the cap, and gulped it down. It tasted good. It felt like the water was spreading to every part of my dehydrated body. Ah, water is so good. I took a breath and then checked out what I had in my hand. It's water. Yep, water. Water inside of a water bottle. The wooden canteen disappeared and turned into a water bottle. Well, whatever. Or maybe this isn't something I should just brush off. I mean, this water bottle is 1.5 liters. I actually make more water. Isn't a net gain good, though? Well, best not to think about the details. It's probably something like whatever was in the impure water changed into pure water and increased the volume by half? Yeah, that's gotta be it. Best not to dwell on what might have actually been in the water for that theory to work. I looked closely at the meat in my inventory to find it was labeled as raw meat Lizaf. So I guess that lizard wolf was called a Lizaf. The fact that it had a name must have meant that creatures existed to give it a name, right? I couldn't be the only person in this world. I had my next goal, find wherever these people lived. I felt a little wary. I had no idea what kind of language barrier I'd have to deal with, let alone what kind of reception I could expect. It sucked if they caught me and made me their slave, but that'd be better than them catching sight of me and clamoring, "Food! Eat!" Still, humans can't live on their own. If I got sick or badly injured, that'd be checkmate for me. I didn't have much choice but to go looking for the natives. In the meantime, I cooked the meat. I wasn't strictly okay eating some unfamiliar animal's meat, but a guy's gotta eat. Yum, 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 yum. The Lizaf meat tasted kind of like chicken. Definitely didn't have the flavor of pork or beef, but it was pretty mild and fibrous, more like chicken than anything. But it tasted pretty good. All I did was get it cooked over on the fire. The fat had a sweetness to it. I found that a little concerning, but the meat was tender and tasty. I was sure it'd taste even better salted, but I had no idea how I'd possibly get salt. Maybe if I were close to the ocean? Does the crafting menu have anything? I thought. Wait a minute. My crafting recipe list didn't increase until I put the applicable materials into my inventory first. If I put whatever the materials for salt would be into my inventory, would salt be added? It's essentially dirt. I had seen a show on TV one time about how kangaroos would lick dirt that had sodium in it. It was a reddish-brown kind of dirt. Was there anything like that around here? I had no idea, so it might be worth it just to dig up some dirt and stick it in my inventory. Crafting bricks and concrete by combining stuff like clay, dirt, stones, and gravel was a staple in survival games and sandbox games. Things like limestone, clay, and gravel actually required processing and stuff to be made, but most games didn't bother being accurate about manufacturing processes. Maybe I could even consider making a base. Having a safe shelter made of concrete or brick was appealing. If I made a base, it would be best to be near a source of water, a lake or river if possible, or a spring at the very least. It might also have been possible to dig a well, but I didn't have the technology for that. I might have been able to finagle it if I used my ability, but I didn't think it was necessary to go to the effort at the moment. I'd give it a try if I found there was no civilization around, and decided to finally settle down somewhere. At any rate, I need something to dig up dirt with. Luckily, my search for food and water had only taken the morning. I still had lots of time left in the day for other things. It was also important that I continue testing my ability to be sure I had an accurate grasp of it. I opened the crafting menu and looked to see if I could find something like a shovel. I found a shovel with a stone edge further down the list, so I tried crafting it. It's not very easy to use. It didn't work as well as a shovel with a steel end. However, it was dozens of times better than trying to dig with my bare hands. I exuberantly dug using the heavy stone shovel. As I dug, combining command inputs and time of my own digging, the dirt went into my inventory. Am I digging twice as fast as usual doing this? The dig command was usually one action comprised of thrusting your shovel into the dirt, raising your shovel, and then discarding it. However, it was also possible to store the dirt in my inventory immediately after picking it up. I didn't need to discard the heavy dirt first, so it wasn't really tiring work. By combining that with the command, I was able to do something like double shoveling, so I was able to dig up dirt at incredible speed. I hummed as I dug along relentlessly. Despite my situation, I was keeping pretty calm. Sure, I was constantly on edge, but there was a part of me that was enjoying this. This should be enough. I dug up all around the area where I was planning to spend the night. Much of it felt like mulch, but some seemed clay-like, so I was a bit hopeful about my efforts. I opened my inventory expectantly to find a reasonable amount of fertile forest soil and clay. However, there was far more fertile forest soil than clay, maybe a 7:3 ratio. Let's see, do I have more things I can craft now? A composite bow had been added to weapons read, which was a bow made from wood and reinforced by animal tendons, bones, or metal plates. It required the bones and other materials from the Lizaf. I didn't know any other use for them, so I went ahead and got one made. Next, I checked recipes I could craft using the dirt, which was what I really wanted to know. There was a long list of farmland blocks and other building blocks, adobe for one thing. I could make now. If I combined stone and clay, then I could even make cobblestone walks. However, I didn't have that many stones, so I probably couldn't make a great number of them at the moment. However, the farmland blocks, at the very least, I now knew that my ability had assumed I would be producing food via agriculture. The fact that I would make building blocks meant that they had considered the possibility of me building a base for myself. But who was the entity that given me this power? I had no idea such a being even existed, but if they did, they had some pretty particular ideas about how I was supposed to get by. Well, let's just put those thoughts aside for now. Back to the matter at hand. Is there something else I can make? Like salt. That'd be nice. I desire salt. Of course, things can't be that easy. Salt was nowhere to be found in the crafting menu, much to my chagrin. However, I did find something interesting. I can craft a furnace, huh? The recipe required clay, stone, eno pelt, and wood. This definitely meant that I could potentially craft things with iron, metal tools. I felt excited at the prospect, but where was I going to find iron ore? And what did I use for fuel? Maybe charcoal would work? As for iron, I'd probably have to mine or collect it from somewhere. In a certain block game, you find it eventually if you just dig deep enough. Would that work in this world too? I'd have to try to find out, but I doubted it would yield any results. I don't know if it was the case for this world, but back on Earth, ores with lots of iron in them were usually found at the bottom of ponds and springs. I had heard that sand and stones in rivers contained iron as well. Also, reddish-colored rocks were actually colored that way because they contained oxidized iron, so presumably you could get iron from those too. At least I was pretty sure I had heard something like that before. Should I head back to the spring? Looking at the sky, I had a feeling that the sun would start to set soon. The clock on my smartphone said it was 3:47 p.m. I didn't know if this was the actual time or not since I didn't have a clock to compare it with, but I had woken up just past 6 according to my phone, so I didn't think it was too far off. How is your phone even staying charged? I looked up once more at the giant planet and moon-looking thing. Every time I saw them, it reminded me all over again how I was in a foreign land. What was I going to do from here on out? I could feel the panic starting to creep in. I doubted that someone who could send me back to my world would actually aid me. After all, I had never heard of other worlds outside of novels and games that were meant for entertainment. Maybe I'd have a chance if there was a secret rescue task force that the government put together to protect the civil liberties of the Japanese people from the secret epidemic of otherworldly kidnappings? What? Yeah, right, like something like that actually existed. I had to face the facts. Guess I'll call it a day. It was important to get proper rest so I didn't burn myself out both physically and mentally. Surely, probably, maybe. But I had to also control how much food and water I consumed. Searching for food is going to be my main goal for tomorrow. Searching for iron and salt can be side goals. At the same time, I also need to run a bunch of tests to see what stuff I can put in my inventory to increase my crafting repertoire. I've got to master my ability if I'm going to keep on living. The more things I can craft, the more things I can do. I'll do my best. Today I gathered lumber and grass, or rather I cut the grass and collected it to use for kindling and crafting materials, and then I placed my hammock up in a tree. I made a fire, ate lizard meat, and went to sleep. I tossed some grain wood on the fire so it threw up a bit of smoke. It was uncomfortable. Maybe someone from civilization would spot it and come looking, or so I hoped. In the short term, it made good insect repellent. Damn all those bugs. Let's see. I think I'm going to go on ahead and end this one off here. I'm going to have to cut out the 2 interruptions, which shouldn't be too much. And I'll see you guys in the next one.